Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York-based cornetist and composer Kirk Knuffke. Over the course of our interview, he talked about how he grew up in Colorado, how he got some great learning about the jazz craft from Denver friend and jazz great Ron Miles. Since 2005, he has been in New York City and has been making a name for himself. He was a 2015 Rising Artist in Downbeat. He has a critically acclaimed album, Arms and Hands, that was out in early 2015, and he's gigged with some of the best in the business, like Roswell Rudd, Myra Melford, Tootie Heath, and the great Billy Hart. There's a lot going on. He's very cool and talented, and he has a story you should hear. Dig this interview, my friends.
First of all, thank you for taking a little time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you asking.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start off the top. I know you're always busy, but give me an idea of what has been going on lately.
Right now, there's a couple things happening. I just got done playing a concert with the Mark Elias Quartet, and then we're working on a duet recording with bassist Michael Bizio that's going to be on a New York label called Relative Pitch in the spring. So we've got a concert at a art gallery here in Manhattan, and then recording on the 29th. So that's the what's happening for the rest of the month. And then I'm working on new music with Charlie Hunter, the guitarist, and he's going to make a recording in March that's going to be on. And so that's just a couple of things that are happening right now.
Talk to me about your latest release, Arms and Hands. Talk to me about the creative energy that went into that, how the album's been doing, kind of a little bit about the album.
There's been a really great reaction to the record, which I'm really happy about. And it was released on CD and LP and as well as digitally. And so some people really appreciate being able to get it on vinyl. And the way it all came together was the trio, which has been my working trio since 2010 or no, that's not too early. 2012, I believe. Bill Goodwin on drums and Mark Elias on bass. And the way it came together was I was playing in Bill Goodwin's group, and I was also playing in Mark Elias's group, and before I formed the trio, and they'd never met each other before or played together, and I just really loved their playing so much I wanted to put them together and have a band with that being the rhythm section. So that was the original idea, was getting those two guys together. We started playing quite a bit around the city. And then when I wanted to make the record, I thought it would also be cool to bring in some other guest voices. So that's why we have Daniel Carter and Jeff Lederer and Brian Dry on different tracks. Those are guys that I also play with a lot in other groups. I play with Jeff Lederer and Matt Wilson Quartet, which is something I do a lot also. And I'm playing a couple different bands with Brian and have long-standing friendship with Daniel. So that's how those guys came into it.
Let me go back to the beginning of your life. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I lived there just, for like 2 years. And then I was raised in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a college town, has about 100,000 people in it. And then when I was 20, I moved to Denver and I started playing professionally when I was 16. And then after I lived in Denver for 5 years, I moved to New York City, first living in Queens and then in Brooklyn and then in Manhattan.
So talk to me a little bit about where you were, kind of the Colorado, where you were raised. Like, what was it about your upbringing that gave you this appreciation for jazz and for music?
Well, there's thankfully school band programs there, which they don't have everywhere, and that strong. So it's really strong school band program out there. And my older brother Jay, was involved in the jazz band. And he played trombone, so I would go to his high school band concerts because he's 6 years older than me. So I saw him playing the jazz band, and I just thought it was really cool, especially the trumpet players and also the drums. So I decided that I wanted to play either drums or trumpet, and then it just solidified in my mind that I wanted to play the trumpet. And then when I went to high school, I had a really great high school band director named Mike Smith that was a drummer that actually played with Nat Adderley and Fred Wesley, and he was a really good drummer. He just happened to be the high school band director for Fort Collins High School. So that was really fortunate. And he introduced me to all kinds of music like Ornette Coleman and Henry Threadgill and John Zorn, and this is, you know, pretty remarkable to have somebody like that around. And then in Denver, there's not a huge music scene, but there is a very, very strong music scene with people like Ron Miles, who's a very good friend of mine, and Art Landy is there. Joe Bonner was still alive and playing, and I got to play with him. He's a pianist that played with Pharoah Sanders and a bunch of other people. And so there were these guys there. Fred Hess is another guy. So, and they were really, you know, you could go watch him play and you could talk to him afterwards, and they were all very nice to me. So I started hanging out with Ron when I was still in high school, and then that's why I wanted to move to Denver, was to be closer to those guys. And so it was actually really natural, and it was nice because it wasn't such a big scene that I actually started getting a lot of work, which I might not have gotten if I was 17 or 18 in New York City, because there would have been so much competition. So I actually got a lot of work that maybe I wasn't really qualified for yet, but it became like a lot of really great experience.
Talk to me about the cornet. Why did you pick that?
Well, the cornet came early and was always in the back of my mind. So I started on trumpet when I was 12, and I got a rent-to-own trumpet. And then my parents bought me, after they saw that I was going to keep on doing it, they got me a Yamaha student trumpet, which I played for many years. But when I went to get my trumpet fixed, I saw an old cornet in the repair shop, and it was just like, oh man, what's that? This is like when I was 13 or 14. 13. So my parents wouldn't buy it for me because I already had trumpets, so I mowed lawns and saved up my allowance, and I bought the cornet. So it was always kind of like the special personal thing that I got for myself. And I loved the sound of it, and it was, but it was a really old horn, so it didn't work as well as my trumpet. But I used it in like the jazz combo at school, and but I had to play trumpet in the orchestra, of course, and other places where trumpet was required. So, but when I played things that I wanted to do, like improvised music that I was doing with my friends and jazz and different things, I would always play the cornet. Later on, the trumpet took over more and more just because of being in situations that demanded trumpet, more being hired just to be a trumpet player than necessarily to be an individual. I was doing a lot of that work for a while when I was in my early 20s. So I was playing all trumpet. And then when I moved to New York, still played trumpet for a couple of years, but I'd been talking with Ron Miles off and on, and then more and more about how I really just wanted to play cornet again and not play the trumpet anymore. And so he actually gave me the instrument that I play now as a gift. And so that was just such a wonderful thing. So I never looked back after that.
So when you were a kid, was it always music when you were going to grow up, or did you have other dreams?
It was always music, and that was starting very early. I just couldn't imagine myself doing anything else, even in junior high. As soon as I could try to organize little bands with my friends, and I did, and we had swing bands and ska bands, and it was always it.
Talk to me a little bit about a jazz album that may have parted the curtains for you, that really opened your eyes and you were like, wow, this is amazing.
There's definitely some really good examples of that. There's Henry Threadgill record called Making a Move that I got when I was in high school that was really, because I just didn't know what was going on. That was really great. And also, really the first time I really started to listen to Chet Baker, it was a really big deal. One of the first records I got was Chet Baker with Strings, which has kind of these kind of schmaltzy string arrangements, but Chet just plays so beautifully. So I learned that record, and I learned how to play the whole thing down without writing down any of it. Just start the record and play every note. that Chad played. Because his sound, to me, opened up the whole world of just how beautiful, a trumpet sound could be. So that was a really big one. And also, Art Ensemble of Chicago, there's a record called Welcome Home Jamaica that I always cite as a big influence. And that's where Lester Bowie just plays so beautifully, and also Roscoe Mitchell. So those were some definitely big records for me.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about your education since high school up to this point in your life. What kind of education, even out in the real world or in the classroom setting, talk to me about that progression to today.
Well, there was an interesting thing for me. School was always really frustrating for me because I'm dyslexic and had some learning disabilities when I was little. So I never wanted to take any lessons or anything. That was because music was my thing. It was how I could kind of get away from everything. So my parents were really encouraging, and they thought, well, do you want to have trumpet lessons, since you like it so much? And no, I don't. So the first ones I took were when I took some lessons from a great trumpet player that lives in Colorado named Corey Peterson when I was 17, 18, around there, a couple of lessons. And then I did go to college for 1 year at the University of Northern Colorado, but I dropped out when I was 19. And then I moved to Denver shortly after that, just because I wanted to play professionally, and school environment didn't really appeal to me. But I was also hanging out pretty regularly with Ron Miles already at that time. Probably about once a month or something, I'd go to his house. But they weren't trumpet lessons. He didn't say, you need to hold the horn like this or breathe like this. We just play together and hang out for a while and talk about, new records that he got and that he's listening to or things he's practicing. And it was just more like a friendship, but with someone that was so much better and more mature than me. But he saw something in me, and he also asked me a lot of questions sometimes about, like, well, how do you do that or something, which was really, really interesting for me. So I consider that like a big mentorship. And then I did take lessons in jazz, like jazz theory from pianist Art Landy that lives in Boulder, Colorado, for about a year. So that's it. I had classical trumpet lessons in college for that 1 year, but I have to say that that was probably the environment where I learned the least about anything. I had learned much more from hanging out with my friends when I got to New York. There was a big rude awakening also when I got to New York, just how advanced the music was and the players were. So I took some of my new friends aside and asked them about, like, how they were conceptualizing some of this music that they were writing and playing. So I would take, always asking a lot of questions. And so that's the long answer about my education. And it's just been an obsession with teaching myself my whole life, acquiring as many recordings and books and things as I can, and spending a lot of time alone working.
Well, another facet of you is that you're a composer. Talk to me a little bit about tracks that you have to switch in your music brain to get into composing.
There's always, I don't really have to switch gears, and I don't, when I practice, this happens, like when I practice my instrument, this happens every day pretty formally. Like if I have a rehearsal, then I have to go to that, or if I have a gig, I have to go to that. But if not, then I'm going to play as much of the day as it's physically possible for me. But the composing side is kind of always going on in the background. So if something pops up that I really like, I can write it down. If I get some inspiration from something that I'm practicing or listening to, or just even seemingly random sounds outside or something, then I'll just grab paper and write it down. And I compose a lot with my voice too while I'm walking around, just walking around Central Park and singing into a tape recorder. So that's kind of always going, but I could go for a couple days without writing anything down, and then one day I'll write 4 songs. So it's just, that's it's pretty variable, but it's always constant. I have so many stacks of music waiting to be played and recorded.
So that had to be a big leap for you. In 2005, you come to New York City from basically the Midwest in Denver. Talk to me a little bit about that migration. What was so great about New York when you got there, and what was kind of the cultural change that you had to go through?
Well, it was kind of the opposite of the old, like, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere quote about New York, because I was making it in Denver, and then I lost a gig there, here and there, and then all of a sudden it wasn't really going that great in Denver. So I thought, yeah, if I can't make it in Denver, then I've got nothing to lose in New York. So I moved to New York. So, but then things actually started to happen in a way immediately, but still very gradually. When I moved to New York, I met a great friend of mine, now a drummer named Kenny Wallison, and he invited me to play. I went to a concert where he was playing with John Zorn, who he plays with all the time. But I met Kenny, and we hit it off, and we started playing together a lot. And then he invited me to come play with a guy named Butch Morris, and that started a great, long-standing association until Butch passed away. And that was like my first recording in New York, and my first trips to Europe ever were with several tours with Butch, and then I started meeting some of my great friends that I still have now, like Brian Dry, a trombone player, and Jeff Davis, a drummer who's also a Colorado native, but I didn't know him in Colorado. He had moved to New York before I did. But I started running around and meeting as many people as I could, and trying to line up as much as I could. Because one of the things that happened to me in Denver, before I moved, I got to play a session, like just not a gig, but a session during the day with a great drummer in Denver named Paul Romaine. And I kind of kicked myself afterwards, and I said, man, I lived here for 5 years, and I never even asked Paul if he wanted to play. You know, I had this opportunity the whole time, and I didn't take it. So when I moved to New York, I thought, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to try to meet everybody and try to at least hang out and play, even if you don't get to play a gig, but just say, hey, can we hang out this afternoon and play with as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Well, and obviously that's worked out. You had 15 albums plus that you released as either a leader or a co-leader. Give me an idea of, was there a period that was more prolific than another? Like there was a lot of learning, a lot of recording, a lot of gigging, more than usual in your career?
There's always been things going a little bit in waves, but there's always a lot of work going on. If it's a period where I only have a couple of gigs, then I'll be practicing and writing as much as possible and trying to plan recordings. Other things that the recording got more prolific when some people, like record labels, got wind of me and then wanted me, offered me slots to record. So when I met Nils Winter of Steeplechase Records, and then he wanted me to continuously record, which is great. And also there's a newer association with Fresh Sound Records from Spain and Royal Potato that put out Arms and Hands, as well as there's a great label called Relative Pitch in New York that's done several things for, and a great label in Lithuania called No Business. So once some of those contacts came through, because those are hard to make. Those guys are so inundated with offers to make records that they can't even wade through all the people that would like to make records for them. So once those things got a little more, established, that was more prolific with the recording end anyway. But I made some records without any prior support, and then I was able to find homes for them. Like my first record for Clean Feed, which is another great label, is called Bigwig, and I made that without any contacts anywhere, and I just sent it around to every conceivable label, and then Pedro from Clean Feed said he would like to put it out, which was really great. That was in 2005. 2006. So that was pretty close to after I moved. And then same thing. I didn't know Nils Winther from Steeplechase. I made this record called Mockingbird, and he liked it and wanted to put it out. So I had to kind of, I got a ton of rejection letters. When I could even get rejection, a lot of the time it was just silence from those guys. And I totally understand why, because they can't even deal with it. A lot of jazz labels are just one or two people, so they're doing so much work all by themselves. So they have 30, 40 emails a day from people. Well, please listen to my record. Please put it out my record. And mailboxes stuffed with stuff. So yeah, things have been a lot more prolific in the recording end since I was 27, 28 till now.
Very cool. Well, and over your career, you've been fortunate enough to play with people like Matt Wilson, Billy Hart, Tootie Heath, Roswell Rudd. What's it like to be around people that have had so much mileage in their career and has such a stature in the world of jazz? What do you learn? What do you feel from them?
Well, that's one of the most important things to me, is to learn from more experienced musicians, and especially older musicians, to play like with Roswell Rudd. It's the whole history of the trombone. I mean, he's the grandfather of avant-garde trombone. So it's like it's nonstop learning from someone like that. And I ask, I don't pester people, but I try to ask a lot of questions. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to play with Bill Goodwin too. His experiences. He started playing with George Shearing when he was 25, and then he never stopped doing, amazing gigs and playing with Phil Woods for 40 years and all that stuff. And of course, when I played with Tootie and recorded with Tootie, that was like, he played with Lester Young,
Yeah.
It's kind of, he played with, it's just like it's easier to name the people that he didn't play with, if there are any. So that's really important to me. And so I try to keep up with those guys, even if I haven't seen him in a while. I played a couple times with Marshall Allen, and he's now over 90, but I haven't played with him in a while, so I want to take a trip down to Philadelphia just to see him, just to keep up with him and see what he's working on.
Sure. Well, we talked about these big names that you played with, but I want to ask you, who would you consider your jazz heroes?
My jazz heroes, well, some of them I've luckily got to play with, like the people that I just mentioned. Roswell is definitely one of them that really pops out. Some people I didn't ever get to meet because I didn't get to New York in time, like Lester Bowie. I would have loved to know, but I never got to know. But of the people that I haven't played with that I really would love to, never played with Henry Threadgill. That's big. He's a big hero of mine, and I've talked with him a bunch of times. We know each other, but it's that I would love to happen, as well as Roscoe Mitchell. It would be great, and I'm a big Joe Lovano fan too, so I would love to play with Joe, and I know Joe, and he's good friends with Matt, and so I'm just kind of waiting for that one. I'm sure that'll happen sometime.
Yeah.
But so those are some big heroes for me, of guys that are around and playing, and I'd love to do more with Tootie. I made a couple of recordings with Hummy Drake, who was in Chicago, and he's a big hero of mine. And so there, I have a lot of heroes.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's needle the list down here. If you could get into a jazz time machine, the DeLorean, and go anywhere, who would you want to see in the history of jazz music, and where would you go?
One person that I always sticks out that I would really love to have seen play is Papa Joe Jones, and like see maybe see the Basie band with Papa Joe playing drums. That would be, to see one of those groups, or see Duke's band with Rex Stewart, or really get to see Louis Armstrong, like that. Those would be hard to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this: why do you love jazz?
I love jazz because it never stops fascinating me, and it just is it's really the only thing I can see myself doing, because it's really an endless road of discovery and study and just wonder. It's not, it's really a magical thing to me, and you can work on it from so many different angles, and there's such a great community too. I feel like I have hundreds of friends because of this music that I wouldn't have, and to say that you have friends that are 90 or 80 or 20, it's not something that everybody in every field could say, and it just constantly fascinating.
Let's say we hook up in about 20 years from now, and you're well into your career, and I ask you first thing, what's been going on? What are you going to want to see happen over a couple decades?
Well, I feel like what's happening is really what I want to happen. So it's just for things to sustain and build in a good gradual way, like they have been for the last 10, 15 years. That's what I look forward to keep happening, and I hope that there's more of a strong public interest maybe in the music. I know that there is a very strong interest in the music, and I really appreciate that. There's really diehard fans all over the world, but it would be nice to see that increase and get, just bigger numbers. And I'd like to be touring even more with my own groups, which is starting to happen more, and there's more stuff coming up next year where I'm going to Europe with my trio with Mark and Bill. And so of course I want that kind of thing to be more frequent, but other than that, just keep it going.
Right on. Final question here. Everybody has their vision of who you are. Fans that you play for do, your immediate family, your friends. But tell me who you think you are.
Well, I'm a hard worker. That's the big thing that's important to me. And there's this great book by Steve Martin called Born Standing Up, where he talks about how he really had to invent this whole thing with what he thought was very little skills to start out with. And I always had an association with sound, but it was always so much harder for me to learn things than other people, how to read music, how to do this or that. So that's what I see myself as a really hard worker, learning these things that didn't come naturally to me. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Hey, Kirk, thanks for opening up. Thanks for your time, and continued success. It's great work, man.
Thank you so much, Joe, for your interest. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Kirk for his passion, his music, and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.